Pybus, an artist based in London, UK. I grew up in northern England in a little village in the middle of nowhere. Came down to London in 2001 to study at Goldsmiths. Really hated the city, was petrified to move here. The second I got here, really loved it, and then decided to stay on. Studied fine art at Goldsmiths, graduated in 2004. Kept trying to apply to do MAs. Every year all the MAs rejected me, but I was determined to get on an MA, so I just worked for 2 or 3 years, kept applying and applying. Eventually Royal College decided they'd take me, so I started there in 2006 and graduated in the Sculpture MA in 2008. I didn't know that there was such thing as an artist though. Like, I grew up in quite like a, well, it was the north and it was the 80s and 90s, so there's not really much going on there. And I was always creative, I was always kind of making stuff, but like my school, my family, nobody knew anything about art. The only kind of idea of an artist was kind of like Monet or Dali, like dead people basically, so nobody really knew that there was a career prospect there, you know. This is like, I think people forget, but this is like going back before even the internet. Like, people did not have access to information and kind of access to kind of like new ideas, other people, larger networks, so you really were stuck in a very kind of localized kind of island kind of mentality. And the big change for me was kind of in my mid-teens when the young British artists started making the headlines in the tabloids and on TV, and that's like, back then you had 4 TV channels, so that was it, you know, and Channel 4 started covering a lot of them, so I'd see people like Damien Hirst and Tracy Emin, and they'd be on TV, and I would kind of like notice that they were also very kind of working class backgrounds like myself. And I really picked out, I was like, okay, there's people that are kind of like me, that are creative, and they're making this odd stuff, and they're alive, and they have these big careers from it. And that's when I kind of realised, oh, okay, there is a kind of market for this. Not that I knew even the word market, but I knew there was kind of like this potential. You could be like a growing up and make art and have ideas and have some kind of career. So I really focused on that. You know, it's still throughout all my college years when I was a teenager in school, people were always trying to push me to do like architecture or interior design. They still didn't quite get it, but kind of, I think it was a real important thing seeing those kind of artists showing on TV. Really showed someone like me that there was kind of like people ahead of me that have achieved it, and it's something that I really wanted to do, which is kind of how I got led to kind of wanting to kind of come to London and study in London, even though like I was like a little country bumpkin kid, petrified of the place. It was a long journey. So I graduated in 2008. So I studied all through the boom years of the early noughts. So I was expecting like a lot of people to kind of go out, have a career straight from your MA, and kind of like that's the way it works. I graduated the year that the recession hit, so the art market just completely collapsed for any kind of emergent artists. So I kind of just ended up working a lot of crappy jobs, retail, like gallery, anything I could get my hands on. Nobody was interested in my work. This is before social media really caught on as well, so there was no real like way to get your work out there. So yeah, from 2008 I just kept working. I constantly worked. I'd work from my bedroom, I'd work anywhere, like I just never stopped working, but nothing was happening for me professionally. And then in January 2014 I really hit a low where I was just like, nothing is happening whatsoever. But it kind of like clicked in my head then that if nothing's happening for me and nobody's paying attention to me, then like why am I trying to kind of make this work or trying to fit into a system which isn't interested in me? And it was really empowering actually, because from that moment on I was like, if there's no audience, then I only make stuff for what I want to see or what interests me. So like before then I maybe kind of like toned myself down or edited some of the source material out because I thought it wasn't like serious art. So from that moment on I was like, okay, well like Pokemon really interests me, IKEA really interests me, you know, what can I really kind of do with this? So went to the pound shop. I had no money, so I went to the pound shop, got canvases from the pound shop, and I literally just like painted and painted and painted. I didn't stop. I just kind of didn't worry about whether anyone was going to be interested in this, and just kind of like, so for about January till August I'd made loads of paintings, and then my sister just mentioned I should go on Instagram. I thought it was for like 12-year-old kids, and she was like, no, go on it, you know. So I went on Instagram, started uploading the work, and then within a month of that, like, a gallerist saw the work, picked me up, I started selling, then my career started going from then, which was like, I don't know, it was really weird. Like, the second I stopped making work to try and please the audience was the moment that the audience actually became interested in the work, and I think that was a really important lesson for me to learn as an artist. It's sort of like, it's not about trying to follow what's already happening or trying to please what people already want. It's about kind of trying to challenge kind of people's taste levels, their values, their interests, and kind of like, I don't know, look for an area of culture that's not kind of completely full of ideas or full of attention, and then kind of like try and build a kind of place for you there. Yeah, so kind of like, when I started working with what I kind of wanted to work with, I guess IKEA and Pokemon were the first two things. IKEA kind of, I don't know, it seems crazy to have like kind of quite an emotional relationship to a global brand, but I think kind of like IKEA was really important to me because, like, again, I was very creative, but I grew up in a very kind of stifled environment, you know, and so there was very little kind of visual information. Like, I couldn't even afford like a magazine, so like literally the only visual information you got was free stuff or what was on TV. So yeah, the IKEA catalogue would come once a year. It looked nothing like anything I'd kind of, the homes, the air of the places I've lived in, you know, like especially at that time at IKEA, it was very bold, graphic, kind of very kind of like weird postmodern kind of aesthetic, which kind of was not Northern England or anything I understood. So that always really stood out, that there's kind of like, it really showed me like it just showed me a new aesthetic or a new way of putting things together, you know. It's sort of like there's something really like kind of utopian or kind of happy about that kind of like brand, and I kind of it always stuck with me, that like it's a really strong visual element, you know. It's sort of, and then kind of the IKEA thing, and then there was like the Pokemon thing, which is again like this global brand, which it kind of like, I didn't play it, but I remember getting it from my little sister back in the 90s, you know, and she'd be addicted to it. But I was always kind of aware of that, these little characters, and how kind of these characters were kind of designed to kind of emotionally connect with the audience. And because you have this emotional connection, you stick with that brand and you're faithful to that brand, you know, you buy into that brand, you know. And then like each new generation of Pokemon, they bring out a new set of Pokemon, and you always have to collect all the Pokemon. So it kind of really feeds into that kind of like element we all have, where we just kind of want everything, and it kind of, if there's not a full set, it kind of gets a bit stressful, and they keep doing that, and it's relentless Pokemon with that, you know. It's sort of like, it kind of reinvents itself constantly, you know. It's sort of, I kind of saw that as mirroring the way the kind of art world works and the way that people collect certain artists. I think the kind of sampling of the brands, it kind of, when I was studying at Goldsmiths, I would work a lot with kind of Nintendo imagery, but it was like the Super Mario stuff, but it was the formal elements of it. So like the designs of the kind of the triangles, the squares, and like the way they kind of used kind of flat graphic elements to create like three-dimensional spaces. So it was a much more formal engagement with it. I kind of really shied away of kind of using any kind of overt branding. I don't know, I think I was still very much, I think a lot of people fall into this kind of like fantasy that like the artist is like this like genuine original and is really special, and everything they do is just kind of like never seen before. And I think kind of like I very much fell into thinking that's what the artist's identity was. And I think kind of as I've got older and more confident with kind of just my voice, I've actually kind of realised that it's not necessarily about coming up with something new or never seen before. I don't really know how even popular that is. It's actually about kind of how I take my experiences, my kind of like understanding of kind of the world, my intellectual kind of investigation into things, and how I can kind of remix them to kind of give a new read into the world, which I think is kind of like a very precedent, oh, I can't think what the word is, a very current way to kind of work with imagery, in the way that kind of like, since social media has really taken over, the idea of like the meme, and how kind of like people take pop culture moments or kind of news events or historical events, you know, and they just remix it, add a little thing, and then it kind of gives like a completely new read into the original source material. So I think kind of once I started getting more confident with that, I actually started overtly using these brands, you know, and sort of like not hiding the fact that I'm using the brands, you know. It's sort of, and then in a sense, like what I like now is that kind of like for many people, they will look at something like IKEA or Pokemon or see a Pikachu, and then they'll think of like Michael Pybus. And I think there's something quite subversive about kind of like these brands which are designed to be global as like, and kind of like consumed by as many people as possible, in a sense to be as bland as possible, but also have a little bit of personality. Like I can kind of like ride on that, and kind of people can associate me with that, but then also see that kind of when I kind of play with that brand, it becomes like my kind of version of the brand, so the works kind of become like memes, basically. The paintings are like memes, yeah. So I'm off to Belgium on Wednesday. I have a show called Reality Apathy at Tatjana Peters Gallery. For that show, like, I'm really wanting to push a kind of taste storyline. So I think within art there's this real pressure, especially like with social media now as well, there's this real pressure to kind of have this particular kind of tasteful approach to kind of imagery, to opinions, to just everything really. Like, it's kind of like nice would be the word, like, you know, it's like, it's nice, it's like, you know. And so I really want to kind of challenge myself with that. So I've kind of trying to introduce paintings which include imagery which you shouldn't really paint. Like I've started using Mr. Hanky, like it's like basically like as a painter, why would you paint shit? You know, it's meant to be nice to go on people's walls, but I kind of want to kind of bring these kind of elements which are like a little bit more uncomfortable, you know. It's sort of, or like some of the imagery in the show is sort of, it looks very close to maybe something you'd buy from IKEA in the 90s as wall art or something. And I think I really want to push kind of my visual language to those kind of edges, to see kind of where my own kind of taste barriers kind of exist. I find that taste is often used as a way to exclude people or kind of categorize them and look down upon them. Especially like I come from like a working class northern background, so coming into the art world, you kind of can really see how taste is very class-based and how it's really used to kind of like define whether somebody should be taken seriously or not. And I think that's important, that's part of human culture, that's the way we work, you know. I just think I'm really interested as an artist to kind of play with those kind of levels. So the exhibition kind of, I've used that to introduce some new kind of imagery which kind of like pushes kind of my own personal taste kind of boundaries, and also as an opportunity to introduce some new imagery into kind of like the canon of imagery I use. And then kind of I've repainted this Picasso painting which is called Le Repos, and it went at auction last year for $35 million, which wasn't really the storyline around that because it's a Picasso, of course. But what happened was it actually belonged to a billionaire couple and they got divorced, and part of the divorce settlement was the ex-wife got the Picasso painting, and the ex-husband kind of got in touch with her and said, look, you need to come and collect this painting, it's at the house, it's yours. And she was like, oh, I don't need to take it because that's a fake one. I did a copy and hung it above the bed, and she'd already taken the real Picasso. But he'd been living with the fake Picasso thinking it was a real Picasso. And I think there was something really interesting about that kind of like, again, it was like a Matrix-like kind of revelation that he'd kind of been looking at this thing, just accepting reality as it was, you know, and then it kind of like, it was kind of, I don't know, the rug was pulled from beneath his feet and she'd already taken the thing. So I really loved the idea that this kind of like, she'd already done a copy of this Picasso that she already owned, and then he didn't realise it's a Picasso, not the Picasso. So there's kind of like this kind of storyline of like a filtering of reality or a distortion of reality, which is kind of what social media is doing now. It's really distorting our understanding of reality, or how we kind of understand like news or facts, or kind of what people are doing, what people look like, you know. So I kind of wanted to kind of expand on that kind of storyline. So kind of I've repainted, I think it's about 19 or 20 versions of it, all at different sizes. So this show in general will be like a real kind of investigation. I'll be looking at this idea of kind of my kind of identity as an artist is like just at the beginning of my career against the identity of artists that are at their peak of their careers. So kind of by me kind of appropriating and kind of remixing imagery from them, and then kind of with me expanding this idea of like kind of what like a tasteful artist should be, you know, and sort of like an artist at kind of my stage of the career, which is still very new, you know. I'm meant to be like, I don't know, like a puppet or a well-behaved little puppy dog, and say the right things, like the right people, have the right opinions, make the right looking work, you know, try and fit in as much as possible, you know. And sort of, I think that again is like a taste kind of issue, you know. It's sort of like when it comes to intellectual taste, or kind of the taste of ideas. And I think I really want to push these kind of things and put myself out of these kind of boundaries and see kind of where it can lead me. So the whole show is like a real mix of kind of me playing with taste, pushing boundaries, and kind of like exploring the idea of what we kind of accept as a reality these days, and how kind of we have to kind of assume that everything we're kind of fed now is a kind of augmented kind of version of that. And instead of me trying to hide from that, I really want to kind of celebrate it and exploit it, and kind of see where creatively that can take me going forward. Best way to keep up to date, and kind of, I guess Instagram would be the best, which is just at Michael Pybus. Sort of that's kind of the one I use most often, and then I upload a lot of my thoughts, a lot of my sketchbooks, a lot of my writing, a lot of kind of news sources or stories that I'm looking at. Like I always try and post about that. So that's probably the one that I'm most engaged with day to day. And then kind of there's my website, michaelpybus.com, which has like my full archive of all my previous exhibitions and CV and all that stuff. Yeah.